For 7 years, Hannah Whitmore fed a starving outcast in secret. Tonight, he was gone, and something royal lay where he should have been. Snow pressed hard against Blackridge, turning the narrow service road white beneath a moonless sky. Hannah pulled her faded blue cloak tighter and kept one hand over the bundle hidden beneath it. A small loaf of warm bread, a covered bowl of beef stew, a flask of hot water wrapped in cloth. Nothing stolen, nothing taken from a hungry child. The kitchen would have thrown the food away before morning, just as it had thrown away countless meals before Hannah learned that someone outside the walls needed them. Still, if Alpha Graham Mercer discovered where she was going, the truth would not matter. Feeding a packless rogue was forbidden. Helping one for 7 years would be something worse. Hannah slipped through the service gate after the refuse cart passed and stepped into Pine Ridge Forest. In good weather, Hollow Watchtower was only about 15 minutes away. Tonight, the snow reached above her ankles, and every step seemed to take twice as long. She knew the path without thinking now. Past the split pine, across the narrow creek, up the low ridge where the old stones first appeared through the trees. 7 winters had taught her every root and shadow. They had also taught her something else. Evan always waited. Sometimes inside the broken tower, sometimes near the dead fire ring, sometimes beneath the leaning pine when the roof leaked, but always there. Hannah reached the clearing and slowed. No firelight, no movement. No familiar figure sitting against the stone wall with that quiet, patient look in his silver-gray eyes. "Evan?" Her voice disappeared into the snow. She climbed the final slope. The lower chamber stood empty. His blanket remained folded near the wall. The wooden bowl she had brought 3 nights earlier lay overturned near the doorway. Hannah set down the food and listened. Wind moved through the damaged roof. Nothing else. Her heartbeat began to quicken. Evan disappeared for hours sometimes. He knew the forest better than most Blackridge hunters, but he never vanished on the night she brought food. Not without warning. Not after 7 years. Hannah stepped outside again and saw a disturbed line in the snow leading toward the trees. Beside it was a dark mark, nearly hidden beneath fresh powder. She crouched. Her stomach tightened. Evan had been sick before. Fever, shaking hands, strange dark veins that sometimes appeared near his collar when he pushed himself too far. He always dismissed it. Old damage, he called it. Something that would pass. It never truly did. Hannah followed the trail several yards before something caught the faint light near her boot. A piece of black silver. She picked it up carefully. It was heavier than it looked, broken along one side, with a symbol pressed deep into the metal. A wolf beneath a crescent-shaped crown. The craftsmanship was too fine for an ordinary traveler, too precise for a rogue living beneath a ruined roof. Hannah rubbed snow from the edge with her thumb. Evan had never shown her anything like it. A sound moved through the forest. Not a growl. Boots. Several pairs. Hannah froze. Voices carried between the trees. Blackridge Patrol. She closed her fist around the metal fragment and turned toward the tower, but a hand caught her arm and pulled her gently behind the wide trunk of a pine. Hannah almost cried out. Evan stood beside her, breathing hard, his face pale beneath wind-tangled dark hair. "Do not move," he whispered. The patrol passed less than 30 feet away. Hannah could feel Evan trembling beside her, though whether from cold, illness, or fear, she could not tell. When the last footsteps faded, she turned toward him. "Where were you?" Evan did not answer. His eyes had dropped to her closed hand. Hannah slowly opened her fingers. The black-silver fragment rested against her glove. For the first time in 7 years, she watched real fear enter Evan's face. Not fear of the patrol. Fear of what she was holding. "Hannah," he whispered, staring at the crowned wolf in her palm. "Where did you get that?" 7 years earlier, Hannah Whitmore had been 17 and already good at disappearing. That winter, Blackridge held its first shift run beneath a clear white moon, and every young wolf in her age group had raced into the forest while families cheered from the ridge. Hannah had shifted too. For less than a minute. Her pale gray wolf had stumbled, lost strength, and returned to human form before she had even reached the first marker. No one came back for her. By the time Hannah walked into the settlement alone, the celebration had moved on without her. She did what she always did when embarrassment became too heavy. She went to work. Near midnight, she carried kitchen scraps toward the service gate, planning to leave them for the refuse wagon. That was when she heard something beyond the wall. Not a call, not a growl. Just the faint sound of someone struggling to breathe. Hannah followed it through the snow until she reached Hollow Watchtower. The place had been abandoned for years. Half the roof was gone, and frost covered the stones. Inside, a man sat against the wall with his eyes closed. He looked older than her by several years, though exhaustion made it hard to tell. His dark hair was wet with melted snow. His clothes were torn from travel, and his face was so pale that Hannah thought, for one frightening second, that she had arrived too late. Then his silver-gray eyes opened. "Go away," he said. His voice was rough but controlled. Hannah looked at the bowl in her hands. It held potato soup, 2 pieces of bread, and half an apple that the kitchen would have discarded by morning. "You need food." "I said go." She should have listened. A packless stranger outside Blackridge was none of her concern. That was what the rules said. That was what everyone would have told her. Hannah placed the bowl on the floor anyway. "You do not have to trust me." The man stared at her as if kindness were more suspicious than cruelty. Hannah turned toward the doorway. "Why?" he asked. She stopped. "Why what?" "Why leave it?" Hannah looked back at him. She remembered the cheering from the ridge, the laughter when her wolf failed, the long walk home with no one beside her. "Because being hungry should not be a punishment." She left before he could answer. The next night, the bowl was empty. Hannah brought another, then another. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. She learned his name was Evan, and he learned not to ask why she always arrived after midnight. At first, they spoke very little. Later, the silence became comfortable. Hannah brought discarded books from the kitchen storeroom. Evan taught her how to read old maps and recognize weather from the shape of clouds. When the sole of her boot split, he repaired it with leather from an abandoned saddle. When his hands shook too badly to hold a spoon, Hannah pretended not to notice. Seasons passed. Evan became stronger, but never completely well. Some days he moved with surprising speed. Other days he could barely stand without resting. Once, during Hannah's 3rd winter of visiting him, a large rogue wolf appeared at the edge of the clearing. Hannah froze. Evan did not move. He only lifted his eyes. The animal stopped, lowered its head, and quietly backed into the trees. Hannah stared at him. "What was that?" Evan gave the faintest smile. Animals understand confidence. She almost believed him. Then he turned away and coughed into his sleeve. When he lowered his hand, there was a dark stain on the cloth. Hannah never forgot it. Now, 7 years later, hidden behind the pine with patrol footsteps fading into the snow, she looked from the black silver fragment in her palm to the fresh dark stain near Evan's glove. It was the same illness, the same secret he had carried from the first night she found him. And for the first time, Hannah began to wonder if Evan had arrived at Hollow Watchtower, already running from something far larger than Blackridge. The patrol disappeared between the pines, but Evan did not move. His hand remained lightly around Hannah's arm until even the last crunch of boots had faded into the storm. Only then did he release her. "We need to leave this trail." Hannah looked at the dark stain near his glove. "You need to sit down." "Hannah." That was not a suggestion. For a moment, something almost amused passed through his silver-gray eyes. Then his expression tightened. He led her away from the main path, moving between trees with a certainty that made no sense for a sick man who claimed to spend most of his life hiding in one ruined tower. He knew where the ground dipped beneath the snow. He knew which branches would snap underfoot. Twice, he stopped several seconds before distant patrol voices reached Hannah's ears. She followed until they reached a shallow stone shelter built into the ridge less than a quarter-mile from Hollow Watchtower. Hannah had walked these woods for years. She had never noticed it. "How did you know this was here?" she asked. Evan lowered himself against the wall. "Old maps." The same old maps you taught me to read?" He did not answer. Hannah knelt beside him and reached for his wrist. Dark lines showed faintly beneath his fair skin, running from beneath his sleeve toward his palm. They looked almost like ink beneath ice. Evan pulled his hand away. "It will pass." "You said that 7 years ago." "And I'm still here." "That is not the same as being well." The words came out sharper than Hannah intended. Evan looked at her, and the anger in her chest softened into something more dangerous. Fear. She had spent 7 years bringing him meals, replacing worn cloth, listening to him explain maps and weather and the old names of distant mountain passes. Yet she suddenly realized how little she actually knew about the man sitting 3 feet away. "Why were they following you?" she asked. "They were following you." Hannah went still. Evan continued before she could speak. "Someone saw you leave Blackridge." "How do you know?" "Because the patrol changed formation when they reached the creek. They were not searching the woods. They were tracking a person." Hannah stared at him. Since when does an outcast know patrol formations? Silence. She thought of all the things she had dismissed over the years. The way Evan handled a hunting knife with effortless precision. The way he could look at a map once and remember every road. The time he corrected a line of old royal script in one of her discarded books, then claimed he had learned it as a child. The rogue wolf that had lowered its head without a sound. "Who taught you all of that?" Hannah asked. Evan looked toward the shelter entrance. "A long time ago, I had reasons to learn." "That is not an answer." "It is the safest one I can give you." Hannah opened her hand. The black-silver fragment rested in her palm. The crowned wolf seemed darker in the weak morning light. "Then answer this." Evan's jaw tightened. Hannah noticed the edge of his torn collar had shifted. Just below his left collarbone was an old scar shaped like a narrow crescent. Her gaze dropped to the metal. Crescent. Crown. Wolf. The pieces felt too close to coincidence now. "This came from you," she said quietly. "You recognized it." Evan looked at her for a long moment. Whatever excuse he had prepared seemed to disappear before he spoke. "There are things you are safer not knowing." Hannah closed her fingers around the fragment. "You do not get to decide that after 7 years." His eyes met hers, tired, guarded, and underneath all of it, afraid, not for himself, for her. "Who are you, Evan?" she asked. The question settled between them. He looked down at the black silver in her hand and finally said, "That belonged to a dead king." Evan's words followed Hannah all the way back to Blackridge. That belonged to a dead king. He had refused to say anything more. Before sunrise, he had insisted she return through the service gate before anyone noticed she was missing, and Hannah had left him near Hollow Watchtower with the bread, the stew, and far more questions than she could carry comfortably. By mid-morning, the snow had stopped, but the settlement felt strangely tense. Workers paused in the lanes. Guards stood straighter than usual. Even the communal kitchen had gone quiet when the bells rang from the pack square. Hannah wiped flour from her hands and followed the others outside. 3 riders waited near the platform in dark blue coats marked with the moon crown. Royal envoys. Hannah's stomach tightened before the oldest one even began to speak. "By order of the Royal Council of Frosthaven, the investigation into the Nightfall Rebellion has been reopened." A murmur moved through the crowd. Hannah barely heard it. Nightfall. 7 years ago. The same winter Evan had appeared near the ruined tower. The envoy continued. "New evidence has confirmed that the body of King Evan Calloway was never recovered." Hannah stopped breathing. Evan. The name struck harder than it should have. Evan was common enough, she knew that. There were probably hundreds of men named Evan across the Northern Realm. Still, her fingers closed around the edge of her apron. The envoy lifted a wooden display board. Fastened to it was a painted copy of the royal emblem used during the missing king's reign. A wolf beneath a crescent-shaped crown. Hannah felt the blood drain from her face. It was the same symbol pressed into the black-silver fragment hidden inside her kitchen locker. Anyone who has seen royal property bearing this mark must report it. the envoy said. "Do not approach anyone claiming royal blood. Bring information to an authorized officer." Hannah looked across the square. Alpha Graham Mercer stood beside the platform in a polished dark coat, listening with a calm expression. For reasons she could not explain, Hannah knew immediately that she would not tell him. Not yet. Later that afternoon, she slipped into the storage room behind the kitchen and took the metal fragment from beneath a folded stack of old linens. She pressed a sheet of paper over the emblem and carefully rubbed charcoal across it until the crowned wolf appeared in gray. The actual fragment went back into hiding. The paper went into her sleeve. Mara Bell was preparing to leave Blackridge when Hannah found her near the South Road. The traveling healer had treated kitchen burns, winter fevers, and Hannah's injured ankle 2 years earlier. She asked few questions and remembered everything. Hannah handed her the folded paper. "Can you tell me what this is?" Mara studied the rubbing. Her expression changed only slightly. "Where did you see it?" "I cannot say yet." Mara looked at her for a long moment, then folded the paper again. "I will be passing through a royal post before Frosthaven. I only need to know if it is real. Then I will ask someone who can answer." Hannah thanked her and returned to the kitchen before anyone noticed how long she had been gone. She expected the day's mysteries to end there. They did not. Near midnight, she opened the inventory ledger and noticed something wrong. 6 sacks of winter grain were marked as spoiled. Hannah had checked those sacks herself 2 days earlier. They had been dry, clean, usable. She closed the ledger and looked toward the rear window. Lantern light moved beyond the grain storehouse. A wagon rolled slowly toward the service lane, covered with a dark canvas. Then another followed. Hannah stepped outside and stayed close to the wall. 2 workers loaded sealed grain sacks onto the second wagon while a guard watched the road. Not spoiled grain. Good grain. Food Blackridge had been told it could not spare. Hannah thought of Lily Harper eating half portions. She thought of the kitchen cutting bread thinner each week. She thought of Evan saving half of every loaf because he never trusted tomorrow. The wagon started south. Hannah took 1 step after it. A voice behind her stopped her cold. "Late night for inventory work, Miss Whitmore." She turned slowly. Graham Mercer stood beneath the storehouse lantern, watching her with a smile that never reached his eyes. Hannah forced herself to breathe before answering. "The ledger showed spoiled grain. I came to check the count." Graham Mercer's smile stayed perfectly calm. "At midnight?" "The kitchen opens before dawn." His blue eyes moved past her toward the road where the final wagon had disappeared. "You are very dedicated for an Omega nobody notices." The words sounded almost kind. That made them worse. Hannah lowered her gaze just enough to look harmless. "I only do my job." Graham stepped closer to the storehouse door. "Then keep doing exactly that." He walked away without another question. Hannah waited until his footsteps vanished before returning inside. Her hands shook as she closed the ledger. Graham knew she had seen something. She could feel it. By the following evening, Blackridge seemed normal again. That frightened her more than open suspicion would have. No guards questioned her. No one searched her locker. Graham did not summon her. Hannah worked through dinner service while watching every doorway. When the last kitchen fire was banked, she wrapped bread and stew beneath her cloak as usual. She told herself she should stay inside. Evan had warned her. Graham was watching. But the dark stain on Evan's glove would not leave her mind. Neither would the royal emblem hidden beneath the folded linens. She waited until the refuse cart passed, then slipped through the service gate. Pine Ridge Forest was quieter than the night before. Too quiet. Hannah took the longer path toward Hollow Watchtower, crossing the creek twice to make her trail harder to follow. Evan was already outside when she reached the clearing. "You should not have come." "You always say that after I arrive." "Tonight, I mean it." He looked past her toward the trees. Hannah set the food down. "Graham is selling grain. I saw wagons leaving after midnight." Evan's attention sharpened. "Did he see you?" "Yes." Then you cannot come back here again. Hannah stared at him. You do not get to disappear because someone frightened you. This is not about me. It has been about you for 7 years, Evan. I just never understood why. He went still. Hannah reached into her cloak and removed the black-silver fragment. Royal envoys came today. They said King Evan Calloway's body was never found. Evan's expression changed, but before he could answer, a branch cracked behind them. 3 Blackridge guards stepped from the trees. Graham followed at an easy pace. There you are, he said. Hannah felt the world narrow around her. Graham looked at the food near Evan's feet, then at Hannah. 7 years of missing kitchen stores suddenly make more sense. Those were leftovers, Hannah said, and part of my ration. We can discuss your accounting later. His gaze settled on Evan. For now, I am more interested in our guest. Evan moved slightly in front of Hannah. She has done nothing wrong. Graham gave a quiet laugh. A rogue defending an Omega. How noble. One guard carried a silver restraint chain. Evan saw it and his face lost color. Hannah noticed immediately. Do not put that on him. Graham looked at her. You seem unusually concerned. The guards closed the distance without striking anyone. Evan did not resist, but the moment the silver restraint touched his wrists, his knees weakened. Hannah stepped toward him. Evan. Stay back, he said through a tight breath. The movement pulled his coat open. Something slipped from Hannah's hand as she reached for him. The black-silver fragment landed in the snow between Graham's polished boots. Everyone stopped. Graham bent slowly and picked it up. He brushed away the snow. The moon crown appeared beneath his thumb. For the first time since Hannah had known him, Graham Mercer looked genuinely afraid. He raised his eyes to Evan. Where did you get a royal signet? Graham Mercer turned the black-silver fragment over beneath the lantern light, and the color slowly left his face. Where did you get this? He asked again. Evan stood between the guards with the silver restraint around his wrists, breathing carefully as if every movement cost him more than he wanted anyone to see. It is mine, he said. Graham's eyes narrowed. That was not my question. Hannah stepped forward. He does not owe you an explanation. Graham looked at her, almost surprised. Then his expression settled into something colder. You have been feeding a rogue in secret for 7 years, stealing from Blackridge, wandering beyond protected territory, and now you are telling me what he owes? I did not steal anything. That is not what the pack will hear. By the time they reached Blackridge Square, lamps were burning in nearly every window. Word traveled quickly. Wolves gathered in coats and blankets, whispering as Hannah and Evan were brought before the raised stone platform. Lily Harper stood near the back, beside one of the kitchen women, looking frightened. Hannah saw her and thought of the thin slices of bread served all week. Graham climbed the steps and held up the signet fragment. Tonight, we discovered that Hannah Whitmore has been secretly supplying an unknown rogue with Blackridge food for years. Murmurs spread through the square. Hannah kept her shoulders straight. The food was discarded leftovers and part of my own ration. Graham ignored her. This stranger also carries property connected to the royal house. Until we know why, he will be treated as a threat. Evan's face remained calm, but the dark lines beneath his skin had reached his neck. Hannah noticed. Graham noticed too. He leaned closer to her and lowered his voice. There is a simple way out of this. Hannah looked at him. Tell them he forced you. She stared. Graham continued softly. Say he threatened you into bringing food. Say he took advantage of a weak Omega. You go back to the kitchen, he disappears from Blackridge. Everyone survives the embarrassment. Evan lifted his head. Do it. Hannah turned toward him. What? Tell them I stole it. His voice was quiet, certain. Tell them I forced you. For 1 second, the square seemed to disappear. 7 years of winter nights came back to her, Evan saving half a loaf because tomorrow was never guaranteed. Evan repairing her boots. Evan listening when no one else did. Evan never once asking what she could give him beyond the meal already in her hands. Graham raised his voice. "Did this rogue force you to take food from your pack?" Hannah looked at the faces around her, some curious, some suspicious, some already convinced. Then she saw Lily again, too thin, too quiet. Hannah finally understood what frightened her most. It was not losing her job. It was allowing a lie to become truth because someone powerful said it loudly enough. "No," she said. The square fell still. Graham's jaw tightened. Hannah pointed toward the grain storehouse. "He never stole from Blackridge. You did." A sharp murmur moved through the crowd. 6 sacks were marked spoiled, even though they were clean 2 days earlier. I saw the wagons leave last night. Good grain. Sealed grain. While children here were given half portions. Graham's face hardened. "Be careful." Hannah's pulse hammered, but her voice stayed steady. "I checked the inventory. I know what I saw." Evan looked at her with something deeper than fear now. "Hannah," he said quietly, "you should have saved yourself." She met his eyes. "You were worth saving before I knew who you were." Graham stepped back as if the words had changed something he could no longer control. Then he gave the guards a short command. "Take the rogue away. He is no longer welcome under Blackridge law." Evan closed his eyes. The dark lines at his throat deepened. For the first time, Hannah felt something strange move through the air around him. Not a scent. Not exactly. Pressure. Old. Vast. Controlled with enormous effort. Evan opened his eyes again and looked directly at Graham. "Forgive me, Hannah," he said. Then his voice changed. Evan opened his eyes, and the quiet man Hannah had known for 7 years seemed to vanish without moving an inch. "Kneel." He did not shout. He did not need to. The single word rolled across Blackridge Square like a pressure change before a storm. Conversations died. Wolves stiffened. Then, one after another, knees touched the frozen ground. Guards, workers, betas. Even Graham Mercer staggered backward before dropping to one knee, his face drained of color. Hannah remained standing. She could barely breathe. Something immense filled the square around Evan, something controlled, ancient, and unmistakably powerful. It was not anger. It was authority, the kind no local alpha could imitate. Evan swayed. The dark lines beneath his skin spread higher along his neck, and his breath caught sharply. Hannah stepped toward him. "Evan." He lifted one hand, stopping her. "Stay there." The effort of speaking seemed to cost him. Graham looked up from the ground, disbelief twisting across his face. "What are you?" Evan stared at him, but before he could answer, a horn sounded beyond the south gate. Once, then again. The crowd turned. Hoofbeats approached fast through the settlement. Royal blue banners appeared between the buildings, marked with the same moon crown Hannah had seen on the envoy's display board. The gates opened. A column of mounted royal guards entered Blackridge Square and came to a halt near the platform. At their head rode an older man with silver at his temples and a dark blue officer's coat. He dismounted before anyone spoke. His eyes moved across the square, past Graham, past the kneeling guards until they found Evan. The officer stopped breathing for a second. Hannah saw it happen. His entire face changed. Shock first, then something deeper. Grief, giving way to recognition. "Captain Elias Ward," Graham said quickly, trying to recover some authority. "There has been a misunderstanding. This rogue was found carrying stolen royal property." Elias did not look at him. "Where is the signet?" Graham hesitated, then held out the black-silver fragment. Elias took it carefully. From inside his coat, he removed a small leather case and opened it. Inside was another broken piece of black silver. Hannah's heart began to pound. Elias placed the 2 fragments together. The break matched perfectly. crescent crown, wolf, one complete seal. The square went silent enough for Hannah to hear the wind moving against the rooftops. Elias looked at Evan again. The Royal Archive received a charcoal rubbing this morning from a healer named Mara Bell. We authenticated the mark before riding here. Hannah felt the world tilt. Mara had reached someone. Her small piece of paper had traveled farther than she ever imagined. Elias stepped forward. For a moment he seemed unable to speak. Then he removed his sword belt and placed it on the ground beside him, not as a threat, but as a sign of respect. He lowered himself to one knee. 7 years, he said softly. Evan's expression tightened. Elias bowed his head. We searched every road north of Frosthaven, every river crossing, every ruined keep. His voice shook once, then steadied. Your Majesty. Hannah forgot how to breathe. Around her, heads lowered farther. Graham stared at Evan as if the ground beneath Blackridge had opened. The starving man from Hollow Watchtower. The quiet stranger who saved half his bread. The man who repaired her boots beside a broken wall. Evan Calloway, the lost Alpha King. Evan's knees nearly gave way, but Hannah reached him before he fell. He caught her forearm, holding himself upright. For the first time, she understood why the silver had weakened him, why patrol formations came easily to him, why old royal script had never seemed old in his hands. Hannah looked around and saw everyone kneeling. Instinct pulled at her. Slowly, uncertainly, she began to lower herself too. Evan tightened his hand around hers. No. Hannah looked up. His silver-gray eyes were tired but steady. Not you. Hannah stayed on her feet because Evan would not let her kneel. That simple refusal changed the entire square. Captain Elias Ward ordered the silver restraint removed at once, and a royal healer from his escort examined Evan beneath the lanterns. No miracle followed. The dark lines at his throat remained. His hands still shook. Whatever had kept him hidden for 7 years had not disappeared just because people knew his name. By sunrise, Blackridge had changed. Royal officers sealed Graham Mercer's office, grain storehouse, and trade records. Hannah stood beside the kitchen ledger while Elias compared her counts with the official inventory. 6 sacks marked spoiled had never been spoiled. Neither had 12 more listed the month before. The missing grain had been sold along the South Trade Road, while children inside Blackridge ate reduced portions. Lily Harper received a full breakfast that morning for the first time in weeks. Graham was brought into the administration hall and allowed to answer for the records. At first, he denied everything. Then Elias placed a second ledger on the table, recovered from Graham's locked cabinet. Payments, dates, merchant names, and one entry from 7 years earlier. Hannah watched Evan go still. The payment had been made for one thing only, an unguarded mountain passage on the night the rebellion reached the northern roads. Graham's face changed. I did not know who was coming through, he said. I was paid to clear the route for a few hours, that was all. Evan's voice was quiet, and you never asked why. Graham had no answer. The truth was uglier because it was smaller than Hannah expected. Graham had not planned the rebellion. He had not hunted a king. He had simply chosen money over duty, then repeated that choice until people beneath him paid the price. Elias ordered him removed from leadership and transferred for formal judgment before the Royal Council. Evan did not celebrate. When Graham was gone, Hannah found him alone near the kitchen doorway, staring toward the road to Hollow Watchtower. Why did you never tell me? She asked. Evan looked tired enough to be the man she had found 7 winters ago. Because people who knew I survived became targets. He told her only what she needed to understand. The rebellion, the escape, the enchanted silver that had entered his body and bound his wolf so deeply that shifting became dangerous. The royal scent faded, his strength became unreliable. Every time he used too much power, the poison pushed back. So you stayed hidden. At first to survive. His eyes met hers. Later, because I did not know who I could trust. Hannah thought of all those nights carrying bread through the snow. You trusted me. Not quickly. A faint smile touched his face. You kept coming anyway. She looked down. I thought you were starving. I was. I thought you had nothing. Evan was quiet for a long moment. That is why it mattered. Hannah looked up. He stepped closer, but not enough to crowd her. When I had a kingdom, thousands of people bowed because they had to. When I had nothing, you brought me food because you wanted to. His voice softened. I know which one meant more. Something in Hannah's chest tightened. What happens now? I return to Frosthaven. And Blackridge? A new alpha will be chosen under royal law. The grain will be returned. No one here will lose food because Graham wanted profit. Hannah nodded, but the distance between them suddenly felt larger than the road to the capital. Evan seemed to understand. Come with me. She searched his face. As what? He did not answer like a king. Whatever you choose. Before Hannah could speak, Evan's expression changed. He pressed one hand lightly against his chest. Hannah felt it too. A strange warmth moved through her, quiet but unmistakable, and somewhere deep inside, her pale gray wolf lifted its head for the first time in years, as if it had finally heard a voice it remembered. Several months later, Hannah stood beneath the morning light of Frosthaven and watched Evan cross the palace courtyard without stumbling. The change had not happened overnight. Royal healers had spent weeks drawing the silverbane binding out of his body in careful stages, and some days had been harder than others. But the dark lines beneath his skin had faded. His strength had returned slowly, so had his wolf. Hannah had changed too, though not in the way the court expected. She did not spend her days learning how to stand beside a throne. She spent them studying food laws, pack records, and the small decisions that determined who ate and who went hungry. Evan never told her what role she should take. He asked what she wanted to build. Her answer took them back to Blackridge. Hollow Watchtower no longer looked abandoned when they returned. The broken roof had been repaired. The lower chamber had been expanded into a warm dining hall, and a long wooden table filled the center of the room. Above the door hung a simple carved sign, the open hearth. No royal crest, no rank markings, just a promise written beneath the name. No one leaves hungry. The first guests arrived before noon, rogues who had slept beside roads, Omega families traveling between territories, orphan children, Blackridge workers, royal guards. No one was asked to prove status before receiving a meal. Lily Harper sat near the middle of the table, with bread in both hands and the smile Hannah had never seen during the grain shortage. Evan stood quietly beside Hannah, watching the room fill. He wore no crown that day, only a dark coat and the expression of the man she had known long before the realm called him Majesty. You did this, he said. Hannah shook her head. We did. Evan smiled. You started it 7 years ago. Later, when the last winter sunlight turned the windows gold, they walked outside together. Snow covered the ridge in a thin white layer, almost exactly as it had on the first night Hannah found him. Evan stopped beneath the old pine near the tower. His silver-gray eyes softened. There is something I need to ask you. Hannah felt the quiet warmth inside her before he spoke. Over the past few weeks, her pale gray wolf had become more alert whenever Evan entered a room. His black wolf responded the same way. The healers had finally explained what the silverbane binding had hidden for years. A mate bond. Real, but never strong enough to force a choice. Evan reached for her hand, then waited until she placed hers in his. If there were no crown tomorrow, he said. If Frosthaven forgot my name, if I had nothing again, would you still choose me? Hannah looked toward the tower, remembering a thin man beneath a damaged roof, saving half a loaf because tomorrow was uncertain. I already did. Evan closed his eyes for a moment, and something peaceful passed across his face. When he opened them, the bond between their wolves settled into place, not like a command, like recognition. They returned to the dining hall as evening fell. Evan sat beside Hannah at the long table. Someone placed a basket of warm bread between them. Without thinking, Evan picked up one loaf and began to break it in half. Hannah laughed softly. He looked at her. What? She pushed the entire basket toward the center of the table. You do not have to save half anymore. Evan looked around. Every seat was filled. Every plate held food. No one waited outside. Slowly, he placed the whole loaf back in the basket and took Hannah's hand. The kingdom would remember him as the king who returned. Hannah would remember the man who had once believed tomorrow might bring nothing. And perhaps that is the lesson worth keeping. Kindness matters most when there is no reward in sight. I believe Hannah changed a kingdom because she first chose to see one forgotten person. What would you have done in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe if you want more stories where courage, dignity, and love change what power alone never could.